Hello, land of YouTube. Thank you for tuning in to tonight's show, the live reading of The Green Book by Muammar al-Qaddafi. Very much looking forward to digging into the solution of the problem of democracy, the authority of the people. I'm just going to set us up in another platform, which is Instagram. So can't help but love me some Instagram too. So here now, oh, it won't do it. Oh no, and it flipped. See, when you try to do too many things live, then it just doesn't always work as well as what it would have if we'd have done it a different way. So all of that is to say, work with what you got, my friends. And just adjust. Did you know that a missile is actually off course 99% of the time? But because it's constantly willing to make adjustments, it is able to actually stay on course despite the misdirections. I believe, yes, that is Karen E. Wells. The Inner Child course that I got off of Udemy, which is a really great resource. If you're not familiar with it, I would highly recommend becoming familiar with it. I'm actually going to be getting the special practice course up there. I am working on that now that I am into a forced semi-retirement from the grocery store until further notice. So very much looking forward to doing some different things that I enjoy in order to be rewarded for what I would enjoy doing and then get paid to do through sponsorships, ideally. And I'm going to get the Patreon going as well. And then I'm going to have the course on Udemy. And then you can join the summits that are going to maintain themselves for free, because that's how we connect with each other and find fellow warriors while we are still free to do so. It is 7:06, and I'm very much excited to dig into the instrument of government as part one, the solution of the problem of democracy, the authority of the people. Oh, you know, I'm actually doing this quite professionally because I am doing this for a gentleman to place it on Spotify. So I'm going to restart and do it all together. So this is the reading of The Green Book by Muammar al-Qaddafi by Laura JEH. Part one, the solution of the problem of democracy, the authority of the people. The instrument of government. The instrument of government is the prime political problem confronting human communities. The problem of the instrument of government entails questions of the following kind. What form should the exercise of authority assume? How ought societies to organize themselves politically in the modern world? Even conflict within the family is often the result of the failure to resolve this problem of authority. It has clearly become more serious with the emergence of modern societies. People today face this persistent question in new and pressing ways. Communities are exposed to the risks of uncertainty. Communities are exposed to the risks of uncertainty and suffer the grave consequences of wrong answers. Yet none has succeeded in answering it conclusively and democratically. The Green Book presents the ultimate solution to the problem of the proper instrument of government. All political systems in the world today are a product of the struggle for power between alternative instruments of government. This struggle may be peaceful or armed, as is evidenced among classes, sects, tribes, parties, or individuals. The outcome is always the victory of a particular governing structure, be it that of an individual, group, party, or class, and the defeat of the people, the defeat of genuine democracy. Political struggle that results in the victory of a candidate with, for example, 51% of the votes leads to a dictatorial governing body. So, I'm going to cut out these parts in the replay. And I wish, oh, well, when it's your mom, you don't mind so much, but hopefully she realizes that I am live. So I'm going to go back and get all of that edited out. So here we go. Back over to YouTube. Hello, and let's go. People today face this persistent question in new and pressing ways. Communities are exposed to the risks of uncertainty and suffer the grave consequences of wrong answers. Yet none has succeeded in answering it conclusively and democratically. The Green Book presents the ultimate solution to the problem of the proper instrument of government. All political systems in the world today are a product of the struggle for power between alternative instruments of government. This struggle may be peaceful or armed, as is evidenced among classes, sects, tribes, parties, or individuals. The outcome is always the victory of a particular governing structure, be it that of an individual, group, party, or class, and the defeat of the people, the defeat of genuine democracy. Political struggle that results in the victory of a candidate with, for example, 51% of the votes leads to a dictatorial governing body in the guise of a false democracy. Since 49% of the electorate is ruled by an instrument of government they did not vote for, but which has been imposed upon them. Such is dictatorship. Besides, this political conflict may produce a governing body that represents only minority. For when votes are distributed among several candidates, though one polls more than any other, the sum of the votes received by those who received fewer votes might well constitute an overwhelming majority. However, the candidate with fewer votes wins, and his success is regarded as legitimate and democratic. In actual fact, dictatorship is established under the cover of false democracy. This is the reality of the political systems prevailing in the world today. They are dictatorial systems, and it is evident that they falsify genuine democracy. Parliaments. Parliaments are the backbone of that conventional democracy prevailing in the world today. Parliament is a misrepresentation of the people, and parliamentary systems are a false solution to the problem of democracy. A parliament is originally founded to represent the people, but this in itself is undemocratic, as democracy means the authority of the people and not an authority acting on their behalf. The mere existence of a parliament means the absence of the people. True democracy exists only through the direct participation of the people and not through the activity of their representatives. Parliaments have been a legal barrier between the people and the exercise of authority, excluding the masses from meaningful politics and monopolizing sovereignty in their place. People are left with only a facade of democracy, manifested in long queues to cast their election ballots. To lay bare the character of parliaments, one has to examine their origin. They are either elected from constituencies, a party or a coalition of parties, or are appointed. But all of these procedures are undemocratic, for dividing the population into constituencies means that one member of parliament represents thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of people, depending on the size of the population. It also means that a member keeps few popular organizational links with the electors, since he, like other members, is considered a representative of the whole people. This is what the prevailing traditional democracy requires. The masses are completely isolated from the representative, and he, in turn, is totally removed from them. Immediately after winning the electors' votes, the representative takes over the people's sovereignty and acts on their behalf. The prevailing traditional democracy endows the member of parliament with the sacredness and immunity which are denied to the rest of the people. Parliaments, therefore, have become a means of plundering and usurping the authority of the people. It has thus become the right of the people to struggle, through popular revolution, to destroy such instruments, the so-called parliamentary assemblies, which usurp democracy and sovereignty and which stifle the will of the people. The masses have the right to proclaim reverberantly the new principle, no representation in lieu of the people. If Parliament is formed from one party as a result of its winning an election, it becomes a Parliament of the winning party and not of the people. It represents the party and not the people, and the executive power of the Parliament becomes that of the victorious party and not of the people. The same is true of the Parliament of proportional representation, in which each party holds a number of seats proportional to their success in the popular vote. The members of the Parliament represent their respective parties and not the people, and the power established by such a coalition is the power of the combined parties and not that of the people. Under such systems, the people are the victims, whose votes are vied for by exploitative competing factions who dupe the people into political circuses that are outwardly noisy and frantic, but inwardly powerless and irrelevant. Alternatively, the people are seduced into standing in long, apathetic, silent queues to cast their ballots in the same way that they Alternatively, the people are seduced into standing in long, apathetic, silent queues to cast their ballots in the same way that they throw waste into dustbins. This is the traditional democracy prevalent in the whole world, where it is represented by a one-party, two-party, multi-party, or non-party system. Thus, it is clear that representation is a fraud. Moreover, since the system of elected parliaments is based on propaganda to win votes, it is a demagogic system in the real sense of the word. Votes can be bought and falsified. Poor people are unable to compete in the election campaigns, and the result is that only the rich get elected. Assemblies constituted by appointment or hereditary succession do not fall under any form of democracy. Philosophers, thinkers, and writers advocated the theory of representative parliaments at a time when peoples were unconsciously herded like sheep by kings, sultans, and conquerors. The ultimate aspiration of the people of those times was to have someone to represent them before such rulers. When even this aspiration was rejected, people waged bitter and protracted struggle to attain this goal. After the successful establishment of the age of the republics and the beginning of the era of the masses, it is unthinkable that democracy should mean the electing of only a few representatives to act on behalf of great masses. This is an obsolete structure. Authority must be in the hands of all of the people. The most tyrannical dictatorships the world has ever known has existed under the ages of Parliament. The party. The party is a contemporary form of dictatorship. It is the modern instrument of dictatorial government. The party is the rule of a part over the whole. As a party is not an individual, it creates a superficial democracy by establishing assemblies, committees, and propaganda through its members. The party is not a democratic instrument because it is composed only of those people who have common interests, a common perception, or a shared culture, or those who belong to the same religion, or those who belong to the same region, or share the same belief. They form a party to achieve their ends, impose their will, or extend the dominion of their beliefs, values, and interests to the society as a whole. A party's aim is to achieve, under the pretext of carrying out its program. Democratically, none of these parties should govern a whole people who constitute a diversity of interests, ideas, temperaments, regions, and beliefs. The party is a dictatorial instrument of government that enables those with common outlooks or interests to rule the people with The party is a dictatorial instrument of government that enables those with common outlooks or interests to rule the people as a whole. Within the community, the party represents a minority. The purpose of forming a party is to create an instrument to rule the people, i.e., to rule over non-members of the party. The party is fundamentally based on an arbitrary authoritarian concept, the domination of the members of the party over the rest of the people. The party presupposes that its succession to power is the way to attain its ends, and assumes that its objectives are also those of the people. This is the theory justifying party dictatorship, and is the basis of any dictatorship. No matter how many parties exist, the theory remains valid. The existence of many parties intensifies the struggle for power, and this results in the neglect of any achievements for the people and of socially beneficial plans. Such actions are presented as a justification to undermine the position of the ruling party so that opposing party can replace it. The parties very seldom resort to arms in their struggle, but rather denounce and denigrate the actions of each other. This is a battle which is inevitably waged at the expense of the higher vital interests of the society. Some, if not all, of those higher interests will fall prey to the struggle for power between instruments of government. For the destruction of those interests supports the opposition in their argument against the ruling party or parties. In order to rule, the opposition party has to defeat the existing instrument of government. To do so, the opposition must minimize the government's achievements and cast doubts on its plans, even though those plans may be beneficial to the society. Consequently, the interests and programs of the society become the victims of the party's struggle for power. Such struggle is therefore politically, socially, and economically destructive to the society, despite the fact that it creates political activity. Thus, the struggle results in the victory of another instrument of government, the fall of one party and the rise of another. It is in fact a defeat for the people, i.e., a defeat for democracy. Moreover, parties can be bribed and corrupted, either from inside or outside. Originally, the party is formed ostensibly to represent the people. Subsequently, the party leadership becomes representative of the membership, and the leader represents the party elite. It becomes clear that this partisan game is a deficit farce based on a false form of democracy. It has a selfish authoritarian character based on maneuvers, intrigues, and political games. This confirms the fact that the party system is a modern instrument of dictatorship. The party system is an outright, unconvincing dictatorship, one which the world has not yet surpassed. It is, in fact, the dictatorship of the modern age. The parliament of the winning party is indeed a parliament of the party. For the executive power formed by this parliament is the power of the party over the people. Party power, which is supposedly for the good of the whole people, is actually the arch-enemy of a fraction of the people, namely the opposition party or parties and their supporters. The opposition is therefore not a popular check on the ruling party, but rather is itself opportunistically seeking to replace the ruling party. According to modern democracy, the legitimate check on the ruling party is the parliament, the majority of whose members are from that ruling party. That is to say, control is in the hands of the ruling party and power is in the hands of the controlling party. Thus, the deception, falseness, and invalidity of the political theories dominant in the world today become obvious. From these emerge contemporary conventional democracy. The party represents a segment of the people, but the sovereignty of the people is indivisible. The party allegedly governs on behalf of the people, but in reality, the true principle of democracy is based upon the notion that there can be no representative in lieu of the people. The party system is the modern equivalent of the tribal or sectarian system. A society governed by one party is similar to one which is governed by one tribe or one sect. The party, as shown, represents the percentage of a certain group of people or the interests of one group in society, or one belief, or one region. Such a party is a minority compared with the whole people, just as the tribe and the sect are. The minority has narrow, common sectarian interests and beliefs from which a common outlook is formed. Only the blood relationship distinguishes a tribe from a party, and indeed, a tribe might also be the basis for the foundation of a party. There is no difference between party struggle and tribal or sectarian struggles for power. Just as tribal and sectarian rule is politically unacceptable and inappropriate, likewise the rule under a party system. Both follow the same path and lead to the same end. The negative and destructive effects of the tribal or sectarian struggle on society is identical to the negative and destructive effects of the party struggle. Class, Chapter 4. The political class system is the same as a party, tribal, or sectarian system, since a class denominates society in the same way that a party, tribe, or sect would. Classes like parties, sects, or tribes are groups of people within society who share common interests. Common interests arise from the existence of a group of people bound together by blood relationship, belief, culture, locality, or standard of living. Classes, parties, sects, and tribes emerge because blood relationship, social rank, economic interest, standard of living, belief, culture, and locality create a common outlook to achieve a common end. Thus, social structures in the form of classes, parties, tribes, or sects emerge. These eventually develop into political entities directed toward the realization of the goals of that group. In all cases, the people are neither the class, the party, the tribe, nor the sect, for these are no more than a segment of the people and constitute a minority. If a class, a party, a tribe, or a sect dominates a society, then the dominant system becomes a dictatorship. However, a class or a tribal coalition is preferable to a party coalition, since societies originally constituted of However, a class or a tribal coalition is preferable to a party coalition, since societies originally consisted of tribal communities. One seldom finds a group of people who do not belong to a tribe, and all people belong to a specific class. But no party or parties embrace all of the people, and therefore the party or party coalition represents a minority compared to the masses outside of their membership. Under genuine democracy, there can be no justification for any one class to subdue other classes for its interests. Similarly, no party, tribe, or sect can crush others for their own interests. To allow such actions abandons the logic of democracy and justifies resort to the use of force. Such policies of suppression are dictatorial because they are not in the interest of the whole society, which consists of more than one class, tribe, or sect, or the members of one party. There is no justification for such actions, though the dictatorial argument is that society actually consists of numerous segments, one of which must undertake the liquidation of others in order to remain solely in power. This exercise is not, accordingly, in the interests of the whole society, but rather in the interests of a specific class, tribe, sect, party, or those who claim to speak for the society. Such an act is basically aimed at the member of the society who does not belong to the party, class, tribe, or sect which carries out the liquidation. A society torn apart by party feud is similar to one which is torn apart by tribal or sectarian conflicts. A party that is formed in the name of a class inevitably becomes a substitute for that class and continues in the process of spontaneous transformation until it becomes hostile to the class that it replaces. Any class which inherits a society also inherits its characteristics. If the working class, for example, subdues all other classes of a particular society, it then becomes its only heir and forms its material and social base. The heir acquires the traits of those from whom it inherits, though this may not be evident all at once. With the passage of time, characteristics of the other eliminated classes will emerge within the ranks of the working class itself. The members of the new society will assume the attitudes and perspectives appropriate to their newly evolved characteristics. Thus, the working class will develop a separate society possessing all of the contradictions of the old society. In the first stage, the material standard and importance of the members becomes unequal. Thereafter, groups emerge which automatically become classes that are the same as the classes that were eliminated. Thus, the struggle for domination of the society begins again. Each group of people, each faction, and each new class will all vie to become the instrument of government. Being social in nature, the material base of any society is changeable. The instrument of government of this material base may be sustainable for some time, but it will eventually become obsolete as new material and social standards evolve to form a new material base. Any society which undergoes a class conflict may at one time have been a one-class society, but through evolution, inevitably becomes a multi-class society. The class that expropriates and acquires the possession of others to maintain power for itself will soon find that through evolution, it will be itself subject to change as though it were the society as a whole. In summary, all attempts at unifying the material base of a society in order to solve the problem of government, or at putting an end to the struggle in favor of a party, class, sect, or tribe have failed. All endeavors aimed at appeasing the masses through the election of representatives or through parliaments have equally failed. To continue such practices would be a waste of time and a mockery of the people. Plebiscites? I've never heard that word before. Hello, 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 hello. Great to see you. Half an hour in, guys. We are on page 21, and the book itself is just about 100 pages. So it's 106. So 20 minutes, 20 pages. We can do it in the next hour, I bet. What do you think? Can you stick around? All right, I'm going to lean back and hopefully you can hear. If you wanted to say anything and let me know, I would love it. If you don't, that's cool. Well, let's read. I gotta be probably closer. And I should be using my mic. I even have one, but I have two. I just don't know how to hook them up to the situations that I've got my lighting and my camera stuff. So that's the real reason that hopefully you can hear this, because I am recording this for a Spotify book reading. And I'm going to start doing more of these. I hadn't even thought about just doing it, but I just felt like it needed to happen. So I started reading you my favorite books, which is what this is. This wasn't one of my favorite books, in fairness. It is the first time that I am reading it just with you two, but somebody shared it with me and I felt like it would be important information for you to be aware of and me too. So here we are. And so I'm going to be doing that with many more books. But I really want to get through the 4 foundational pillars of the teachings of the Ascended Masters. So that's where we're going to go next week. But today we got to get through this one. So let's get back to it, my friends. Curious. So please feel free to do that for sure. And we're going to read the chapter on plebiscites. I am going to see that we are live on Facebook too, which is great. I am also going to get this shared onto Where Misfits Fit, Home for Soulful Seekers. If you are not part of that community on Facebook, then please be sure to change that. It's a really great opportunity to connect with others who are transforming and growing and committing to become a better version of themselves and information that could potentially change their life and the lives of someone else too. So that's what I always do my best to share with you. And I learning about government. Learning about the nuances of government. So, going along. Listen along. Hello, hello, hello. Great to see you. Not sure what your real name is. I can't see your picture specifically. Listen. Come in to listen and grow. That's what I'll say. So, sending over misfits fit home for soulful seekers. It's true. I hope that you will come along. If you're not there already, then I hope that you will go and join. We're misfits fit home for soulful seekers today. Hey, now I'll get back to the book that you are here. Ah, I know it's Pete. How obvious. I am sorry, your picture and name all changed. So how was I to know? I don't know. You know I know it's true. But that's why I asked you to clarify so that I would know for sure. So here we go, guys. Let's go. Plebiscites. It's saying that there were issues with my video, but it's not looking like it now. So here we go. Plebiscites. Plebiscites are a fraud against democracy. Those who vote yes or no do not in fact express their free will, but rather are silenced by the modern conception of democracy, as they are not allowed to say more than yes or no. Such a system is oppressive and tyrannical. Those who vote no should express their reasons and why they did not say yes, and those who say yes should verify such agreement and why they did not vote no. Both should state their wishes and be able to justify their yes or no vote. What, then, is the path to be taken by humanity in order to conclusively rid itself of the elements of dictatorship and tyranny? The intricate problem in the case of democracy is reflected in the nature of the instrument of government, which is demonstrated by conflicts of classes, parties, and individuals. The elections and plebiscites were invented to cover the failure of these. The elections and plebiscites were invented to cover the failure of these unsuccessful experiments to solve this problem. The solution lies in finding an instrument of government other than those which are subject to conflict and which represent only one faction of society. That is to say, an instrument of government which is not a party class, sect, or a tribe, but an instrument of government which is the people as a whole. In other words, we seek an instrument of government which neither represents the people nor speaks in their name. There can be no representation in lieu of the people, and representation is fraud. If such an instrument can be found, then the problem is solved, and true popular democracy is realized. Thus, humankind would have terminated the eras of tyranny and dictatorships and replaced them with the authority of the people. The Green Book presents the ultimate solution to the problem of the instrument of government and indicates for the masses the path upon which they can advance from the age of dictatorship to that of genuine democracy. This new theory is based on the authority of the people without representation or deputation. It achieved great democracy in an orderly and effective form. It is superior to the older attempts of direct democracy, which were impractical because they lacked popular organizations at base levels. Popular conferences are the only means. Chapter 6, Popular Conferences and People's Committees. Popular conferences are the only means to achieve popular democracy. Any system of government contrary to this method, the method of popular conferences, is undemocratic. All the prevailing systems of government in the world today will remain undemocratic unless they adopt this method. Popular conferences at the end of the journey of the masses in quest of democracy. Popular conferences and people's committees are Popular conferences and people's committees are not creations of the imagination. They are the product of thought which has absorbed all human experiments to achieve democracy. Direct democracy, if put into practice, is indisputably the ideal method of government. because it is impossible to gather all people, however small the population, in one place, so that they can discuss, discern, and decide policies, nations departed from direct democracy, which became a utopian detached from reality. I'm going to reread all of that. Direct democracy into practice is indisputably the ideal method of government. Because it is impossible to gather all people, however small the population, in one place so that they can discuss, discern, and decide policies, nations departed from direct democracy, which became a utopian idea detached from reality. It was replaced by party coalitions and plebiscites, all of which isolated the masses and prevented them from managing their political affairs. These instruments of government, the individual, the class, the sect, the tribe, the parliament, and the party, struggling to achieve power, have plundered the sovereignty of the masses and monopolized politics and authority for themselves. The Green Book guides the masses to an unprecedented practical system of direct democracy. No two intelligent people can dispute the fact that direct democracy is the ideal, but until now, no practical method for its implementation has been devised. The third universal theory, however, provides us with a practical approach to direct democracy. The problem of democracy in the world will finally be solved. All that is left before the masses now is the struggle to eliminate all prevailing forms of dictatorial governments, be they parliament, sect, tribe, class, one-party system, two-party system, or multi-party system, which falsely call themselves democracies. True democracy has but one method and one theory. Similarity and diversity of the systems claiming to be democratic do, in fact, provide evidence that they are not so. Authority of the people has but one face, which can only be realized through popular conferences. First, the people are divided into basic popular conferences. Each basic popular conference chooses its secretariat. The secretariats of all popular conferences together form non-basic popular conferences. Subsequently, the masses of the basic popular conferences select administrative people's committees to replace government administration. All public institutions are run by people's committees, which will be accountable to the basic popular conferences, which dictate the policy and supervise its execution. Thus, both the administrative and the supervision become the people's, and the outdated definition of democracy. Democracy is the supervision of the government by the people, becomes obsolete. It will be replaced by the true definition. Democracy is the supervision of the people by the people. All citizens who are members of these popular conferences belong vocationally and functionally to various sectors and have therefore to form themselves into their own professional popular conferences, in addition to being, by virtue of citizenship, members of the basic popular conferences or people's committees. Subjects dealt with by the popular conferences and people's committees will eventually take their final shape in the General People's Congress, which brings together the secretariats of the popular conferences and people's committees. Resolutions of the General People's Congress, which meets annually or periodically, are passed on to the popular conferences and people's committees, which undertake the execution of those resolutions through the responsible committees, which are in turn accountable to the basic popular conferences. Through the responsible committees, which are in turn accountable to the basic popular conferences. The General People's Congress is not a gathering of persons or members, such as those of parliaments, but rather a gathering of the popular conferences and people's committees. Thus, the problem of the instrument of government is naturally solved, and all dictatorial instruments disappear. The people become the instrument of government, and the dilemma of democracy in the world is conclusively solved. The people become the instrument of government, and the dilemma of democracy in the world is conclusively solved. Chapter 7, The Law of Society. Chapter 7. The Law of Society. Law represents the other problem, parallel to that of the instrument of government, which has not been resolved. Although it was dealt with in different periods of history, the problem still persists today. For a committee or an assembly to be empowered to draft the law of society is both invalid and undemocratic. It is also invalid and undemocratic for the law of society to be abrogated or amended by individual, a committee, or an assembly. What then is the law of society? Who drafts it, and what is its relevance to democracy? The natural law of any society is grounded in either tradition, custom, or religion. Any other attempt to draft law outside these two sources is invalid and illogical. Constitutions cannot be considered the law of society. A constitution is fundamentally a man-made positive law and lacks the natural source from which it must derive its justification. The problem of freedom in the modern age is that constitutions have become the law of societies. These constitutions are based solely on the premises of the instruments of dictatorial rule prevailing in the world today, ranging from the individual to the party. Proof of this are the differences existing in various constitutions, although human freedom is one and the same. The reason for the differences is the variation in the assumptions and values implicit in diverse instruments of government. This is how free becomes invaluable. This is how free becomes vulnerable under contemporary forms of government. The method by which a specific modality of government seeks to dominate the people is contained in the Constitution. People are compelled to accept it by virtue of the laws derived from that Constitution, which is itself the product of the tendencies within particular instruments of governments. The laws of the dictatorial instruments of government have replaced the natural laws, i.e., positive law has replaced natural law. Consequently, ethical standards have become confused. The human being is essentially physically and emotionally the same everywhere. Because of this fact, natural laws are applicable to all. However, constitutions as conventional laws do not perceive human beings equally. This view has no justification except for the fact that it reflects the will of the instrument of God, be it an individual, an assembly, a class, or a party. That is why constitutions change when an alteration in the instruments of government takes place, indicating that a constitution is not natural law but reflects the drive of the instrument of government to serve its own purpose. The abrogate of natural laws from human societies and their replacement by conventional laws is the fundamental danger that threatens freedom. The abrogation of natural laws from human societies and their replacement by conventional laws is the fundamental danger that threatens freedom. Any ruling system must be made subservient to natural laws, not the reverse. The fundamental law of society must not be subject to historical drafting or composition. The fundamental law of society must not be subject to historical drafting or composition. Its importance lies in being the decisive criterion in light of which truth and falsehood, right and wrong, and individual rights and duties can be judged. Freedom is threatened unless society adheres to a sacred law with established rules that are not subject to alteration or change by any instrument of government. It is rather the responsibility of the instrument of government to adhere to the laws of society. Unfortunately, people in the world over are currently ruled by man-made laws that can be changed or abrogated, depending upon the struggle for power among competing forms of government. Conducting plebiscites on constitutions is often insufficient. Plebiscites are essentially a counterfeit of democracy since a yes or no is the only option. Moreover, under man-made law, people are compelled to vote on these plebiscites. Conducting a plebiscite on a constitution does not necessarily make the constitution the law of society. In other words, the status of a constitution will not be altered by a plebiscite. It will remain no more than the subject of a plebiscite. The law of society is an eternal human heritage that does not belong only to the living. Therefore, drafting a constitution or conducting a plebiscite on it is a mockery. A catalogues of man-made laws emanating from man-made constitutions are fraught with physical penalties directed against human beings, while tradition contains few such measures. Tradition lays down moral, non-physical penalties that conform to the intrinsic nature of humanity. Religion contains tradition and absorbs it, and tradition is a manifestation of the natural life of people. Its teachings comprise basic social guidelines and answers to the fundamental questions of existence. Most physical penalties are deferred to a future judgment. This is the most appropriate law, affording due respect to the human being. Religion does not provide for prompt penalties, save in certain compelling instances necessary to the well-being of society. Religion contains tradition, and tradition is an expression of the natural life of the people. Therefore, religion is an affirmation of natural laws which are discerned therein. Laws which are not premised on religion and tradition are merely an invention by man to be used against his fellow man. Consequently, such laws are invalid because they do not emanate from the natural source of tradition and religion. Consequently, such laws are invalid because they do not emanate from the natural source of tradition and religion. Chapter 8. Who supervises the conduct of society? Good question. The question arises, who has the right to supervise society and to point out deviations that may occur from the laws of society? Democratically, no one group can claim this right on behalf of society. Therefore, society alone supervises itself. It is dictatorial for any individual or group to claim the right of the supervision of the laws of the society, which is democratically the responsibility of the society as a whole. This can be arrived at through the democratic instrument of government that results from the organization of the society itself into basic popular conferences, and through the government of these people, through people's committees and the General Popes, and the General People's Congress, the National Congress, where secretariats of the press conferences and the People's Committee convene. In accordance with this theory, the people become the instrument of government and, in turn, become their own supervisors. Society thus secures self-supervision over its laws. Chapter 9. How can society redirect its course when deviations from its laws occur? Coffee time. How are you doing? How are you doing? It's great to be with you. I do hope that you can play a little while. It's great to see you, Angelica. Hi, and to all of you who are coming on to here next, I say to you, it is time to go back to reading this, my friends, chapter 9. How can society redirect its course when deviations from its laws occur? Chapter 9. If the instrument of government is dictatorial, as is the case in the world's political systems today, society's awareness of deviation from its laws is expressed only through violence to redirect its course, i.e., revolution against the instrument of government. Violence and revolution, even though they reflect the sentiments of society regarding deviation, do not constitute an exercise in which the whole of society takes part. Rather, violence and revolution are carried out by those who have the capability and courage to take the initiative and proclaim the will of society. However, this unilateral approach is dictatorial because the revolutionary initiative in itself provides the opportunity for a new instrument of government representing the people to arise. This means that the governing structure remains dictatorial. In addition, violence and effecting change by force are both undemocratic, even though they take place as even though they take place as a reaction against an undemocratic prior condition. The society that revolves around this concept is backward. What then is the solution? The solution lies in the people being themselves the instrument of government whose authority is derived from basic popular conferences and the General People's Congress. In eliminating government administration and replacing it by people's committees, and finally in the General People's Congress becoming a truly national convention where basic popular conferences and people's committees convene. In such a system, if deviation takes place, it is then rectified by a total democratic revision and not through the use of force. The process here is not a voluntary option for social change and the treatment of social ills. It is rather an inevitable result of the nature of this democratic system, because in such a case, there is no outside group who can be held responsible for such deviation or against whom violence can be redirected. It's not redirected, it's directed, so. It is rather an inevitable result of the nature of this democratic system, because in such a case, there is no outside group who can be held responsible for such deviation or against whom violence can be directed. Chapter 10, The Press. An individual has the right to express himself or herself even if he or she behaves irrationally to demonstrate his or her insanity. Corporate bodies too have the right to express their corporate identity. The former represent only themselves and the latter represent those who share their corporate identity. Since society consists of private individuals and corporate bodies, the expression, for example, by an individual of his or her insanity does not mean that the other members of society are insane. Such expression reflects only in the individual's character. Likewise, corporate expression reflects only the interest or view of those making up the corporate body. For instance, a tobacco company, despite the fact that what it produces is harmful to health, expresses the interests of those who make up the company. The press is a means of expression for society. It is not a means of expression for private individuals or corporate bodies. Therefore, logically and democratically, it should not belong to either one of them. A newspaper owned by any individual is his or her own and expresses only his or her own point of view. Any claim that a newspaper represents public opinion is groundless because it actually expresses the viewpoint of that private individual. Democratically, private individuals should not be permitted to own any public means of publication or information. However, they have the right to express themselves by any means, even irrationally, to prove their insanity. Any journal issued by a professional sector, for example, is only a means of expression of that particular social group. It presents their own points of view and not that of the general public. This applies to all other corporate and private individuals in society. The democratic press is that which is issued by a people's committee comprising all the groups of society. The democratic press is that which is issued by a people's committee comprising all the groups of society. Only in this case and not otherwise will the press or any other information medium be democratic, expressing the viewpoints of the whole society and representing all its people. If medical professionals issue a journal, it must be purely medical. Similarly, this applies to other groups. Private individuals have the right to express only their own and not anyone else's opinions. What is known as the problem of the freedom of the press in the world will be radically and democratically solved, because it is byproduct of the problem of democracy generally. The problem of freedom of the press cannot be solved independently of that of democracy and society as a whole. Therefore, the only solution to the persistent problem of democracy is through the third universal theory. According to this theory, the democratic system is a comprehensive structure. According to this theory, the democratic system is cohesive. According to this theory, the democratic system is a cohesive structure whose foundations are firmly laid on basic popular conferences and people's committees, which convene in a general people's congress. This is absolutely the only form of genuine democratic society. In summary, the era of the masses, which follows the age of the republics, excites the feelings and dazzles the eyes. But even though the vision of this era denotes genuine freedom of the masses and their happy emancipation from the bonds of external authoritarian structures, it warns also of the dangers of a period of chaos and demagoguery, and the threat of a return to the authority of the individual, the sect and party, instead of the authority of the people. Theoretically, this is genuine democracy, but realistically, the strong always rules, i.e., the stronger party in the society is the one that rules. Part 2. Part 2. The solution of the economic problem. Socialism. Whoa. I can't believe I'm sharing a message about socialism. I am not a political person. I hadn't been. I wasn't. I don't know that this is expressly, but I'm going to get you guys plugged in. We are charging instead of taxing our battery. I will have some more coffee too while I'm here. And then have some water too, because it's good for you. All right, 8 o'clock. On the dot. Oh my God, guys. There's more, but we're going through this really fast. So I'm happy. I hope you are too. Hope you're enjoying the sound of this report and relating it to where we are currently, because that's what I would love to be able to talk about. So definitely make some dots and connect them and then share those in the comments so I could read them. I'd love to learn from you too. All right, we're on chapter 11. Chapter 11, the economic basis of the third universal theory. Important historical developments contributing to the solution of the problem of work and wages. The relationship between producers and owners, workers and employees have occurred in recent history. These developments include the determination of fixed working hours, overtime pay, leaves, minimal wages, profit sharing, the participation of workers in administration, the banning of arbitrary dismissal, social security, the right to strike, and other provisions contained in labor codes of almost all contemporary legislation. Of no less significance are changes in the realm of ownership, such as the enactment of laws transferring private ownership of the state and also those limiting income. Despite these not inconsiderable developments in the history of economics, the problem still fundamentally exists, even though it has been made less severe than in past centuries through improvements, refinements, and developments that have brought many benefits to the workers. However, the economic problem still persists unsolved in the world. Attempts aimed at ownership have failed to solve the problems of producers. They are still wage earners, despite the state ownership, which may vary from the extreme right to the extreme left to the center of the political spectrum. Attempts to improve wages are equally significant. Attempts to improve wages are equally significant to those that were aimed at the transferal of ownership. In the wake of the Industrial Revolution, benefits from wage negotiations secured for workers contained privileges that were guaranteed by legislation and protected by trade unions, thus improving the lot of the workers. As time passed, workers, technicians, and administrators have acquired certain rights which were previously unattainable. However, in reality, the economic problem still exists. Attempts that were aimed at wages were contrived and reformative and have failed to provide a solution. They were more of a charity than a recognition of the rights of the workers. Why do workers receive wages? Because they carry out a production process for the benefit of others who hire them to produce a certain product. In this case, they do not consume what they produce. Rather, they are compelled to concede their product for wages. Hence the sound rule. Those who produce consume. Wage earners, however improved their wages may be, are a type of slave. Wage earners are but slaves to the masters who hire them. They are temporary slaves, and their slavery lasts as long as they work for wages from employers. And their slavery lasts as long as they work for wages from employees, be they individuals or the state. The worker's relationship to the owner or the productive establishment and to their own interests is similar under all prevailing conditions in the world today, regardless of whether ownership is right or left. Even publicly owned establishments give workers wages as well as other social benefits, similar to the charity endowed by the rich owners of economic establishments upon those who work for them. Unlike the privately owned establishment, where income benefits the owner, the claim that the income from the public-owned establishment benefits all of the society, including the workers, is true only if we take into consideration the general welfare of the society and not the private well-being of the workers. Further, we would have to assume that the political authority controlling ownership is that of all the people, practiced through the popular conferences and people's committees, and not the authority of one class, one party, several parties, one sect, tribe, family, individual, or any form of representative authority. Failing this, what is received directly by the workers with respect to their own interests in the form of wages, percentage of profits, or social benefits is the same as that received by workers in the private corporation. In both instances, the producers are wage earners, despite the difference in ownership. Thus, this change in ownership has not solved the problem of the producer's right to benefit directly from what he produces, and not through the society nor through the wages. The proof thereof is the fact that producers are still wage earners despite the change in this state of ownership. The ultimate solution lies in abolishing the wage system, emancipating people from its bondage, and reverting to the natural laws which redefined relationships before the emergence of classes, forms of governments, and man-made laws. These natural rules are the only measures that ought to govern human relations. These natural rules have produced natural socialism based on equality among the components of economic production and have maintained public consumption almost equal to natural production among individuals. The exploitation of man by man and the possession by some individuals of more of the general wealth than their needs required is a manifest departure from the natural rule and the beginning of distortion and corruption in the life of the human community. It heralds the start of the exploitative society. If we analyze the factors of economic production from ancient times to the present, we always find that they essentially consist of certain basic production components, i.e. raw materials, means of production, and a producer. The natural rule of equality requires that each of these components receives a share of this production. Because production cannot be achieved without the essential role of these components, it has to be equally divided among them. The preponderance of one of them contravenes the natural rule of equality and becomes an encroachment upon the other's rights. Thus, each must be awarded an equal share regardless of the number of components in the process of production. If the components are 2, each receives half of the production. If 3, then 1/3. Applying this natural rule to both ancient and modern situations, we arrive at the following. At the stage of manual production, the process of production resulted from raw material and a producer. Later, new means of production were added to the process. Animals utilized as power units constitute a good example. Gradually, machines replaced animals. Types and amounts of raw materials evolved from the simple and inexpensive to the valuable and complex. Likewise, the unskilled workers became skilled workers and engineers, their former huge numbers dwindling to a few specialized technicians. Despite the fact that components have qualitatively and quantitatively changed, their essential role in production has remained basically unaltered. For example, iron ore, a component of both past and present production, was manufactured primitively by ironsmiths into knives, axes, spears, etc. The same iron ore is now manufactured by engineers and technicians by means of smelting furnaces into all kinds of machines, engines, and vehicles. The animal, horse, mule, camel, or the like, which was a component of production, has been replaced by factories and huge machines. Production based upon primitive tools is now founded upon sophisticated technical instruments. Production based upon primitive tools is now founded upon sophisticated technical instruments. Despite these tremendous changes, the opponents of natural production remain basically the same. This consistency inevitably necessitates returning to sound natural rules to solve the economic problems that are the result of all previous historical attempts to formulate solutions that ignore these rules. All previous historical theories tackled the economic problem either from the angle of ownership of any of the components of production or from that of wages from production. They failed to solve the real problem, the problem of production itself. Thus, the most important characteristic of economic order prevailing in the world today is a wage system that deprives the workers of any right to the products being produced, be it for the society or for the private establishment. An industrial establishment is comprised of material for production, machines, and workers. Production is achieved by workers manufacturing materials and using machines. Thus, manufactured goods would not have been ready for use and consumption had they not gone through a production process requiring raw materials, factories, and workers. Clearly, without basic raw materials, the factory cannot operate, and without the factory, raw materials will not be manufactured. Likewise, without producers, the factory comes to a halt. Thus, the three factors are equally essential to the process of production, and without them, there can be no production. The absence of any one of these components cannot be replaced by the other. Therefore, the natural rule necessitates each component receiving an equal share of the benefits of production. It is not only the factory that is important, but those who consume its production as well. The same is applicable to agricultural production processes resulting from only two components, man and land. The product must be divided equally into two shares congruent with the number of production components. Furthermore, if any additional mode, mechanical or otherwise, is utilized in the process, production must be equally divided into three shares, the land, the farmer, and the means of production. Consequently, a socialist system emerges under which all production processes are governed by this natural rule. The producers are the workers. They are called producers because the terms worker, laborer, and toiler have become invalid. The traditional definition is revised because workers are undergoing qualitative and quantitative changes. The working class is declining proportionately to the advancement of science and technology. Tasks once performed by a number of workers are now being carried out by a single machine. Operating a machine requires fewer workers. This has brought about a quantitative shift in the labor field, while the replacement of physical force by technical skill has resulted in a qualitative change in the labor force. The labor force has become a component of the production process. As a result of technical advancement, multitudes of unskilled toilers have been transformed into limited numbers of technicians, engineers, and scientists. Consequently, trade unions will subsequently disappear and be replaced by syndicates of engineers and technicians. Scientific advancement is the irreversible gain for humankind. Thanks to this process, illiteracy will be eliminated and unskilled workers will become a temporary phenomenon destined to gradual disappearance. However, even in this new environment, persons will always remain the basic component in the production process. So, this is a really cheap and short chapter. So this is called Chapter 12, Need. Chapter 12, Need. The freedom of a human being is lacking if his or her needs are controlled by others, for need may lead to the enslavement of one person by another. Furthermore, exploitation is caused by need. Need is an intrinsic problem, and conflict is initiated by the control of one's needs by another. Need is an intrinsic problem, and conflict is initiated by the control of one's needs by another. Oh, this is short too. Chapter 13, Housing. Housing is an essential need for both the individual and the family and should not be owned by others. Living in another's house, whether paying rent or not, comprises freedom. Attempts made by various countries to solve the housing problem did not provide a definite solution because such attempts did not target the ultimate solution, the necessity that people own their dwellings, but rather offered the reduction, increase, or standardization of rent, whether it went to privately or publicly owned enterprise. In a socialist society, no one, including society itself, has the right to control people's needs. No one has the right to acquire a house additional to his or her own dwelling, and that of his or her heirs for the purpose of renting it, because this additional house is in fact a need of someone else. Acquiring it for such a purpose is the beginning of controlling the needs of others, and in need, freedom is latent. Acquiring it for such a purpose is the beginning of controlling the needs of others, and in need, freedom is latent. In need, freedom is latent. Chapter 14, Income. Income is an imperative need for man. In a socialist society, it should not be the form of wages from any source or charity from any one place. In this society, there are no wage earners, but only partners. One's income is a private matter and should either be managed privately to meet one's needs, or be a share from a production process of which one is an essential component. It should not be a wage in return for production. Chapter 15, Means of Transportation. Transportation is also a necessity both to the individual and to the family. It should not be owned by others. In a socialist society, no person or authority has the right to own a means of transportation for the purpose of renting it, for this also means controlling the needs and wants of others, not just wants. In a socialist society, no person or authority has the right to own a means of transportation for the purpose of renting it, for this also means controlling the needs of others. Land. Ooh, now we're getting to good stuff. It's all good, but all right. So this is the Green Book, if you're just tuning in now. And we're now on Chapter 16, Land. Chapter 16, Land. Land is the private property of none. Rather, everyone has the right to beneficially utilize it by working, farming, or pasturing, as long as he and his heirs live on it, to satisfy their needs, but without employing others with or without a wage. If lands were privately owned, only the living would have a share in it. Land is permanent, while those who benefit from the land undergo in the course of time changes in profession, capabilities, and existence. The aspiration of the new socialist society is to create a society which is happy because it's free. This can only be achieved by satisfying man's material and spiritual needs, and that in turn comes about through the liberation of these needs from the control of others. Satisfaction of these needs must be attained without exploiting or enslaving others. Otherwise, the aspirations of the new socialist society are contradicted. Thus, the citizen in this new society secures his material needs either through self-employment or by being a partner in a collectively owned establishment, or by rendering public service to people, or by rendering public service to society, which in turn provides for his material needs. Economic activity is the new socialist activity Economic activity in the new socialist society is a productive one aimed at the satisfaction of material needs. It is not an unproductive activity, nor one which seeks profit for surplus savings beyond the satisfaction of such needs. This, according to the new socialist basis, is unacceptable. This, according to the new socialist basis, is unacceptable. The legitimate purpose for private economic activities is only to satisfy one's needs because the wealth of the world, as well as that of each individual society, is finite at each stage. No one has the right to undertake an economic activity whereby wealth exceeding the satisfaction of one's needs can be amassed. Such accumulations are, in fact, the deprived right of others. One only has the right to save from his own production and not by employing others, or to save at the expense of his own. One only has the right to save from his own production and not by employing others, or to save at the expense of his or her own needs and not of others. If economic activity is allowed to extend beyond the satisfaction of needs, some will acquire more than required for their needs while others will be deprived. The savings, which are in excess of one's needs, are another person's share of the wealth of society. Allowing private economic activity to amass wealth beyond the satisfaction of one's needs and employing others to satisfy one's needs or beyond, or to secure savings, is the very essence of exploitation. Work for wages in addition to being enslavement is previously mentioned. Work for wages, in addition to being enslavement, as previously mentioned, is void of incentives because the producer is the wage earner. Because the producer is a wage earner and not a partner. Self-employed persons are undoubtedly devoted to their work because from it they satisfy their material needs. Likewise, those who work in a collective establishment are also devoted to their work because they are partners in it and they satisfy their material needs from the production. Whoever works for a wage, on the other hand, has little incentive to work. Work for wages has failed to solve the problem of motivation for increasing and developing production. Whether it is a service or goods production, work for wages is continuously deteriorating because it is performed by unmotivated wage earners. Examples of wage labor for the society for private enterprise and self-employment. First example, A worker produces 10 apples for society. The society gives him 1 apple for his production and it fully satisfies his needs. B, a worker produces 10 apples for society. The society gives him 1 apple for his production, which does not satisfy his needs. Second example, a worker produces 10 apples for another person and gets wages less than the price of 1 apple. Third example, a worker produces 10 apples for himself. The conclusion. In the first example, A, because the worker's wages are limited to 1 unit which satisfies his needs, he has no incentive to increase his production. Thus, all the labor force that works for society is psychologically apathetic. B, the worker has no incentive even to produce because he cannot satisfy his needs from the wages. However, he continues working without any incentives because generally, like all members, he is forced to acquiesce to the working conditions of the society. In the second example, the worker works basically to get his wages. In the second example, the worker works basically to get wages and not to produce. Since his wages cannot satisfy his needs, the choices are either to look for another master to get a better price for his work, or be forced, as a matter of survival, to remain where he is. In the third example, the self-employed alone is the one who produces eagerly and voluntarily. In a socialist society, there is no possibility for private production to exist. In a socialist society, there is no possibility for private production to exceed the satisfaction of one's needs, because satisfaction of needs at the expense or by means of others is not permitted. Moreover, socialist establishments operate only for the satisfaction of the needs of society. Accordingly, the third example demonstrates the sound basis of its economic production. However, in all instances, even the bad ones, production is associated with survival. The proof thereof is that even though it the proof thereof is that even though in capitalist societies production accumulates and expands in the hands of only a few owners who do not work but exploit the efforts of others, the toilers are still forced to produce in order to survive. However, the Green Book not only solves the problem of material production, but also prescribes a comprehensive solution for the problems facing humans. But also prescribes a comprehensive solution for the problems facing human societies, so that individuals may be totally liberated materially and spiritually in order to attain their happiness. Other examples. If we assume that the wealth of a society is 10 units and its inhabitants are 10 persons, then the share of each member is 1/10 of the total 1 unit per person. If some members of the society get more than 1 unit each, then a certain number from the society get nothing. Their share of the wealth of their society has been acquired by others, hence the presence of rich and poor in an exploitative society. Let us also suppose that 5 members of this particular society each own 2 units. In such a case, half of the society is deprived of their rights to the wealth of their society, for what should be theirs has been acquired by others. If an individual of that society needs only one of the units of the wealth of the society to satisfy his needs, then those who possess more than 1 unit are in fact seizing the rights of other members of the society, because the 1 unit is all that is required to satisfy the needs of an individual. The additional units are acquired for the purpose of savings. This can only be achieved by the expense of the needs of others. The acquisition of others' share in this wealth. This is the reason behind the existence of those who hoard and do not spread. The existence of those who hoard and do not spend, those who save beyond the satisfaction of their needs, and the existence of those who beg and are deprived of their right to the wealth of the society and do not find enough to consume. Such is an act of plunder and theft, yet according to the unjust and exploitative rules governing such a society, it is legitimate and overt. Any surplus beyond the satisfaction of needs should ultimately belong to all members of society. Individuals, however, have a right to effect savings from the share allocated to their own needs, since it is the amassing of wealth beyond the satisfaction of one's needs that is an encroachment upon public health. It is the amassing of wealth beyond the satisfaction of one's needs that it is an encroachment upon public wealth. The industrious and skillful in a society have no right, as a result of this advantage, to take from the shares of others. They can use their talents to satisfy their own needs and save from those needs. Like any other member of the society, the aged and the mentally and physically disabled should have their fair share of the wealth of the society. The wealth of a society must be likened to a supply establishment or a store providing a certain number of people with daily rations satisfying their needs. Each person has a right to save from such provisions what he wants, i.e., to consume or save whatever portions of his share he decides, utilizing his talents and skill for such purposes. However, those who use their talents to acquire excessively from the supply establishment are undoubtedly thieves. Therefore, those using their skill to acquire wealth exceeding the satisfaction of their needs are in fact infringing upon the public right, namely the wealth of society, which is the store in the said example. Therefore, those using their skill to acquire wealth exceeding the satisfaction of their needs are in fact infringing upon the public right, namely the wealth of society, which is like the store in the said example. Disparity in the wealth of individuals in the new socialist society is not tolerated, save for those rendering certain services to the society for which they are accorded an amount congruent with their services. Individual shares only differ relative to the amount of production, and a public service rendered is in effect. Individual shares only differ relative to the amount of production or public service rendered in excess. Public service rendered in excess. Hence, human experiences throughout history have produced a new experiment in a unique attempt to cultivate the struggle of persons to complete their freedom, to achieve happiness through satisfying their needs, to ward off exploitation by others, to put an end to tyranny, and to find a method to distribute the wealth of the society equitably. Without exploiting others or compromising their needs. It is the theory of the fulfillment of needs for the emancipation of humanity. A new socialist society is but a dialectical outcome of the unjust relationships prevailing in the world today. The new socialist society will introduce the natural solution, privately owned property to satisfy one's needs without exploitation, and collective property in which the producers are partners, replacing private enterprise, which is based on the production of others without recognizing their right to a just share of the product. Whoever possesses the house in which you dwell, the vehicle in which you ride, or the income in which you live possesses your freedom or part of it. Freedom is indivisible. For people to be happy, they must be free, and to be free, they must possess the possibility of satisfying their own needs. Whatever possesses the means of fulfilling your needs controls or exploits you and may enslave you, despite any legislation to the contrary. The material needs of people that are basic and personal start with food, housing, clothing, and transport, and must be regarded as private and sacred, and their satisfaction should not depend on hire. To satisfy their material needs through rent gives the original owner the right to interfere in your personal life and to control your imperative needs, even if the original owner be the society in general. The original owner can usurp your freedom and take away your happiness. The interference of the original owner may include repossessing your clothes, even leaving you naked on the street. Likewise, the owner of your means of transportation may leave you stranded on the sidewalk, and the owner of your house may make you homeless. People's imperative needs cannot be regulated by legal or administrative procedures. They must be fundamentally implanted into the society in accordance with natural rules. The aim of the socialist society is the happiness of the human being, which cannot be attained except by the establishment of one's material and spiritual freedom. The achievement of freedom depends on the private and sacred. depends on the private and sacred attainment of man's needs. One's needs should not be under the domination of others and should not be subject to plunder by any source in society. Otherwise, one will live in insecurity. Deprivation of the means of fulfilling comprises freedom because in attempting to satisfy basic needs, one will be subject to the interference of outside forces on one's basic interests. The transformation of existing societies of wage earners into those of partners is inevitable. The transformation of existing societies of wage earners into those of partners is inevitable as a dialectical outcome of the contradictory economic theories prevailing in the world today. It is also a dialectical outcome of the unjust relationship based on the wage system. None of these issues have been resolved to date. The antagonistic force of the trade unions in the capitalist world is capable of replacing capitalistic wage societies by a society of partnerships. The possibility of a socialist revolution starts by producers taking over their share of the production. Consequently, the aims of the producers' strikes will change from demanding increases in wages to controlling their share in production. Guided by the Green Book, this will sooner or later take place. The final step is for the new socialist society to reach a state in which profit and money disappear. Society will become fully productive. The material needs of society will be met. In this final stage, profit will disappear, as will the need for money. The recognition of profit is an acknowledgement of exploitation, for profit has no limit. Attempts so far to limit profit by various means have been reformative, not radical, intending to prohibit exploitation of man by man. Attempts so far to limit profit by various means have been reformative, not radical, intending to prohibit exploitation of man by man. The final solution lies in eradicating profit, because profit is the dynamic force behind the economic process. Eliminating profit is not a matter of decree, but rather an outcome of the evolving socialist process. This solution can be attained when the material satisfaction of the needs of society and its members is achieved. Work to increase profit will itself lead to its final eradication. So we've gotten ourselves to page 65, which is about domestic servants. And I'm quite tired, to be fair. I did the Lawfully Organized Summit from 4 till 6, and then I was on another call for about 40 minutes before this one. And so if I'm going to do this justice, I'm going to do the rest of it tomorrow. So I will come to you tomorrow and read the rest of this, and I'm going to do some reading, but it's been about an hour and a half of reading. We got through the first 64 pages, so pretty impressed with how far we're able to get through this, and then curious what it means to you, what it means for you, what you're going to do with it. I am also very curious how we can use this, considering that the summit that I did that kind of tuckered me out a bit was the Lawfully Organized Summit that Jackie Phoenix was the guest star on today, who was leading us through the actual process of actually standing under our oath of allegiance to the barons who exercised Article 61 March 23rd, 2001, and basically dissolved the governments. They just didn't let us know, and so we've continued to give them power, and they've continued to give them raises, because ultimately that's what you can do when you don't technically exist, but you are made to see that you do. So that's very interesting what we talked about on the Lawfully Organized Summit. And I would love to invite you to come to the next one, which is going to be on next Thursday, January 28th at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time again. We will read another book. I do believe we're going to be reading The Aura, because tomorrow I want to finish this one, just because this one has a tighter timeline. And hopefully my voice will be the same then as it is now, but I feel like I am good to just wrap up tonight. So if you care to make a comment, let me know what's going on in your day, why you showed up. I'd love to know. And ultimately say peace to you. Thank you for tuning in tonight. And I hope you have a great night. Toodaloo. Laura JEH. Namaste. The light in me honors the light in you. Thank you.